Welcome to Social Elo Ministries, where we are committed to glorifying God while exposing the devil. Are you hungry? And by that, I don't mean are you hungry for food. Are you hungry to fulfill your God-ordained destiny? Are you hungry to fulfill your calling? Are you satisfied being like an arrow tucked away in its quiver, going nowhere? Or are you begging the Lord to pull you out, put you in that bow, line up with the target, and let you go? As the saying goes, your attitude determines your altitude. There are several examples in the Bible where people had a hunger for what the Lord had in store for them, and nothing less would do. An example of this, or one of several examples, is Joseph. In Genesis 37, Joseph was 17 years old. The Lord gave him two incredible dreams about his family bound down to him. Unfortunately, or so it seemed, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. And in Genesis 39, this is how it picks up the story. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him off the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So Joseph had been sold into slavery, and it said the Lord was with him, and he was a prosperous man. However, I submit to you that he was still like an arrow tucked away in his quiver. He wasn't there yet, so he still had a hunger inside. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer of his house. And all that he had, he put in his hands. So he had confidence in Joseph. And it came to pass from the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So Joseph was a slave, but he was blessed, he was well favored. But again, he was like an arrow tucked away in his quiver. He may have been in a good spot, especially under circumstances, but he wasn't there yet. I'll kind of skip over the part where Potiphar's wife seduced Joseph, or at least he tried, and pick it up to where Joseph ended up in prison. And when he was in prison, in Genesis 21 through 23, it states, "But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." So again, Joseph in another place, but the Lord was still blessing him. But again, he was still that arrow tucked away in his quiver. So even though you may be in a spot where the Lord is blessing you, if you're content with being there, that is one thing. But do you still have the hunger to fulfill your calling, regardless of how blessed you are? Again, are you asking the Lord to be like an arrow for him to put you in that bow, line up with the target, and let you go? And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So Joseph was the overseer over all the prisoners. But again, he was like an arrow tucked away in his quiver. Life may have been good under circumstances, but still not good enough. Especially when the Lord gives you a dream. Especially when you know the Lord has so much more in store for you. And it continues, "The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper." You may be thinking that, hey, if you're going to be in prison, at least if you're in charge, then maybe life's good. Again, are you hungry for what the Lord has in store for you? Because a lot of times, similar to Joseph, where he ended up in slavery and then in prison, It was to help develop that hunger. There's just something to be said about a person who truly has a hunger for what the Lord has in store for them. It changes a person's demeanor, especially when they've been held back for a while and the Lord releases them towards a calling. But it continues. In Genesis 40, we kind of see that even though Joseph was, you could say, large and in charge in prison, Joseph wasn't happy with where he was. And in Genesis 40, verses 12 through 15, it states, and by the way, this is when Joseph was in prison, and the Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker were imprisoned, and Joseph interpreted their dreams. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh shall lift up thine head, and restore unto thee thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner, when thou wast his butler. But think of me, when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house, and bring me out of this house. So again, Joseph may have been large in charge in a prison, but he wanted out. Do you want out of your situation that you're in right now? Do you want out of that quiver and into the bow so the Lord can let you go towards your destiny? Are you hungry? Are you hungry? For indeed, I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me in this dungeon. The dungeon is like an arrow tucked away in a quiver. Sure, it's a homely place for an arrow. But do you want to be in a quiver, or do you want to be in a bow, telling the Lord to please let you go? Eventually, the dreams that the Lord gave Joseph, they came to pass, and his family did bow down to him. But it really wasn't so much about them bowing down to him. It was about Joseph ascending to be the second in command in Egypt, Egypt's governor. That was the goal. That, in a sense, was where Joseph could become content, because he was fulfilling his God-ordained destiny. The other things, those are just things to prepare him for what was to come. He was an overseer in the house of Potiphar. He was an overseer in a prison, and then he became an overseer in Egypt. So again, are you hungry? Another person in the Bible who had a hunger was Joshua. Now, for many years, Joshua served as Moses' understudy, so to speak. When Moses sent the 12 Israelite spies into the promised land, Joshua was one of them. And only Joshua and Caleb were the ones who came back with a favorable report. And they said, let us go and possess the land now. But because of the other 10 who doubted the Lord and had fear come in, and because of their lack of faith, the Lord held them back in the desert for 40 years. So again, your attitude will determine your altitude. Joshua and Caleb, they had attitude, we are ready to go forward now. But because of the 10 and their fear, they were held back. But as a part of their punishment, everyone age 20 and above would die in the wilderness. See, many of you are in the wilderness and you're just too content when you know the Lord has bigger promises, bigger things in store for you. But in a sense, you're willing to die in the promised land as opposed to, or correction, die in the wilderness as opposed to moving into your promised land. The Lord did not allow Moses to go into the promised land, but he allowed Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb had a hunger, and especially knowing that they were ready 40 years earlier, but they were delayed into fulfilling their destiny. I can imagine the hunger they had. In Joshua 5, Joshua had an encounter with the captain of the Lord's host. And this is what happened in Joshua 6, verses 1 through 2. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. No one went out, and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. Joshua was looking at a closed door. Now we know, even though I said that your attitude determines your altitude, we know that the Lord is one who opens doors that no one can close, and he closes doors that no one can open. There's some things in your life that is not going to happen until the Lord until the Lord opens the door for you. When the Lord took Joshua to see Jericho, the gates were shut. When you are hungry enough, and like Joshua was hungry after waiting for 40 years for his chance, when you're hungry enough, in a sense, the Lord doesn't even have to open the door for you. He can show you a closed door, and you be willing to kick that door down in order to move towards your destiny. So again, are you hungry? Joshua was hungry. Now, they didn't have to kick the door down. Joshua received some instructions, but they conquered Jericho. And Joshua was the one selected to lead the Israelites to conquer the promised land, to move towards their destiny. And I can imagine, again, after waiting for 40 years, that Joshua was hungry. And he had the hunger that was not going to be satisfied until he received the promises of the Lord. So again, are you hungry? And by the way, if you're hungry, you need to let the Lord know that you're hungry. You need to let the Lord know that you're hungry. And it's kind of like the prophet Isaiah when he said, Here am I, send me. That's the kind of attitude you need to have. Here am I, send me. I am hungry for what you have in store for me. And one of the reasons why, by the way, why the people of Jericho had the gates shut up was because they were in fear of the Israelites. Those who are standing in their way should be in fear because they know that you are just waiting for the Lord to let you go. And when he lets you go, that they basically better move out of your way because it won't be pretty. Are you hungry? Are you hungry? Another example of hunger, and this is the last one I plan on giving, King Saul. Well, it's not just about King Saul. It's about contrasting him with David. In 1 Samuel 9, Saul met Samuel the seer. And Samuel had Saul stay because he was going to tell him something. And in 1 Samuel 10, this is what happened. Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him and said, Is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? And what that basically meant was the Lord had anointed Saul to be Israel's first king. So again, 1 Samuel 10:1, the Lord had anointed Saul to be Israel's first king. When you go further into the story, and I'll read verses 20 through 23, and when Saul had caused all the tribes of Israel to come near, the tribe of Benjamin was taken. When he had caused the tribe of Benjamin to come near by their families, the family of Matri was taken, and Saul, the son of Kish, was taken. And when they sought him, he could not be found. So again, earlier in the chapter, Samuel had anointed Saul as Israel's first king. But on the day when it was being publicly made, or it was being made publicly known that Saul was Israel's king, he could not be found. It's kind of like, where was he? Now you get to see how hungry Saul was. Therefore, they inquired of the Lord further, if the man should yet come thither. And the Lord answered, Behold, he hath hid himself among the stuff. So again, in 1 Samuel 10 verse 1, the Lord had anointed Saul as king. And we see how hungry Saul was, because on the day when he was going to ascend to the throne, he was hiding. And they ran and fetched him thence. And when he stood among the people, he was higher than any of them. and the people from his shoulders and upward. So even though he basically stood above the people, King Saul was hiding on the day that he should be moved towards his destiny. The wait wasn't that long for Saul. It wasn't that painful. When you go through a long and painful wait, your attitude is a little bit different from someone in the sense who basically just has stuff handed to them. Hunger, it drives us. It drives us. Or at least it should. Now, I say all that about Saul to contrast him with David. In 1 Samuel 16, Samuel had anointed David as Saul's successor. But Saul's attitude in accepting responsibility to ascend towards the crown was carried over in the battle against Philistines when they were facing Goliath. Because in 1 Samuel 17, Saul and his men were basically in hiding again. So Saul was hiding from his destiny to conquer Goliath. When David showed up, he was basically saying, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine who dares to defy the armies of the living God?" David was hungry. David was ready to go. And that's why David picked up those 5 smooth rocks, went towards Goliath without even wearing any armor, and he killed Goliath because he was hungry. When you go to 1 Samuel 18, verses 7 through 8, you see someone who doesn't have a hunger, who is holding the hunger that another person has against him. People are saying Saul had killed thousands, but David had killed tens of thousands. And because they were saying that, Saul was jealous. But Saul had the same opportunities that David did. But because David was hungry, he capitalized on those opportunities. So again, are you hungry for what the Lord has in store for you? Your attitude will determine your altitude. So again, are you content with being like an arrow tucked away in its quiver, in hiding? Or are you asking the Lord to put you in that bow, pull you back, line you up with your target, and let you go, release you towards your destiny? Yes, for your good, but most certainly for His glory. Are you